I just, today, we've been reading questions and been kind of sharing some questions. And one of the questions that we had come in is, what do I consider the right in me? Billy, what do you think is good debt? Well, one of the things, the person who really popularized good debt, bad debt, that at least in this current generation that I'm aware of, is when Robert Kiyosaki wrote his book on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Then people began to use the term good debt, bad debt. At least that was the first time I heard it. But one of the things I think we need to understand with that, when we talk about good debt, bad debt simply is when you are taking your credit cards or other sources, installment loans, to buy things that actually depreciate in value. And for example, most of the time in accounting, there are assets that are, for example, put on your balance sheet, and some of those assets, even though they actually go up in value, you actually get to depreciate them. An example of that is real estate. Real estate actually will go on your balance sheet, and even though you get to depreciate residential real estate at about 1/27th a year, the truth of the matter is that really real estate goes up in value. It's the same thing with a commercial real estate piece of property, not just residential. Residential is about 1/27th per year you get to depreciate. Commercial property depreciates at about 1/37th a year. So even though it's depreciating, and what that means, somebody says, well, what does depreciation mean? It means that the IRS allows you to count a portion of what you spent on that property when you purchased it, to actually count it off per year against your income, even though the property's not losing any value. Now, let me tell you, I hear people all the time, they'll say to me, Billy, why do you always talk about taxes? Well, let me say this, people who either have money or people who are really, who really have assets, they're interested in their taxes. So a lot of times when, for example, I would tell some of the young ladies or young men that work in my office, they ask me all the time, they say, well, I don't really think about taxes because they're just taking it out of their paycheck and they just go, oh, okay, that's my taxes. But the truth is, what they don't realize is, even me as an employer, it costs me about 10% more, 5 to 10% more on every check than what they're actually seeing, because I have to match their Social Security. If I'm providing health, I have to provide it to them. So the point is that sometimes you pay more in taxes. So having depreciation as an investor, or having depreciation, is very important for you to be able to protect yourself legally protect yourself against taxes. So what do I consider good debt? I consider good debt is when I borrow money that actually to buy an asset that is appreciating in value, not depreciating. And then secondly, I get to actually take depreciation on that asset on my tax return. That is buying something that is good debt. So when I go buy a car, right, if I pay cash or I'm borrowing against it, which is the question, good debt, bad debt, well then what happens the minute I drive that car off, right? The lot, it's worth 10 to 20% less than I paid for it that day. If I go buy a brand new flat screen TV at somewhere like Best Buy, and I walk out of the store and I've got it on my cart and I'm happy I got it so I can watch the Super Bowl, it's worth about 50% less than what I paid for it. Or that engagement ring that you think is a real asset for the young lady you're buying it for, or vice versa, if you're buying the wedding ring for the guy. The truth is, the minute you walk out of that store, it's worth at least 40 to 50% less than you paid for it at that time. You say, well, what do you mean? It's gold and it's diamonds. Yeah, the problem is you overpaid. So if you borrowed money to buy those kind of assets, a car, television, or a piece of jewelry, what happens is it's only worth about, if you don't believe that, go look on eBay. See what those same things are selling for. Somebody says, well, I can sell them for 75%, not 50. Well, wonderful, but you still lost 25%. So I'm just making the point, you borrow money, now you're paying interest to buy what you're calling an asset, but let's call it an asset, and that asset is depreciating in value, okay? So the idea is you buy an asset that actually appreciates in value with the debt you borrowed, and you also get to count depreciation on your taxes. If you have those two things happening for you and it's helping you, then those are what I call good debt. I'm borrowing money to buy an asset that appreciates in value. Listen, I want you to know, some people say, how can I follow you? How can I get a hold of you? You can follow us on Facebook at Billy Epperhart. You can follow us on Instagram, also on Twitter. So we're all over the social media universe. Also, you can go to our website, BillyEpperhart.com, and there's all kind of blogs, vlogs on there. In addition to that, people have asked, well, how can I get more involved? And one of the things you do when you go to the website, you can click right on the Give Partner button if you want to help us in our endeavors in both of our nonprofits. We have two. One is called Tricord Global. You can tricordglobal.com, and our Wealth Builders, where we give the financial and educational information. So you can really help us, and we would appreciate you doing that. So thanks for watching. We'll see you later.